Today I'd like to talk about stress, and not necessarily stress as a whole, but how stress affects one specific group of people, that being student athletes. So to start, I'd like to talk about the poignant story about a young lady named Madison Holleran. Madison was a student athlete on the track and field team at the University of Pennsylvania. And while she received high marks on the track, she also achieved really well in school, earning a GPA of 3.5. However, Madison unfortunately committed suicide on January 17, 2014. She cited the reason for her suicide as not being comfortable with all of the stress that she was undergoing. It was overwhelming and consuming her, and she couldn't deal with it anymore. So my question is there anything else that the University of Pennsylvania could have done to prevent this tragedy? Is there anything else other institutions could use to prevent them from happening in the future? So let's first take a look at what the student athlete has to go through during the standard week. As soon as you sign your letter of intent to go to a Division I university, you're signing up for 20 hours of athletically related accountable team activities. This means stuff like practice, competitions, all of that stuff is counted towards the maximum amount of hours you can partake in. Also, if you take the average amount of 15 credits during a semester and multiply that by the time you're spending on it outside of class, that's an extra 45 hours. So if you add those together, that's 65 hours, which is almost twice as much as the normal American works in the workforce. You combine that with the added stress of having to go between coaches and professors and trying to find the perfect balance about how much time to spend on each one. That's only more stress that's put on the student athlete's shoulders. So if we look at some different things about what we know about student athletes, we know they undergo more stress than the normal students because they have to mediate between school and athletics, they have to go back and forth, and they're expected to achieve higher marks in both the classroom and on the athletic field because they're representing the entire university. However, student athletes are also less likely to receive psychological help for their stress issues, and this can be because of two main reasons. One is the time constraint, that they don't necessarily have time to go back and forth between practice and school and then go see a psychologist. Another big issue is the stigma attached to it. If they go to a psychologist and their coach finds out about it, they'll be like, oh gee, maybe this person's head just isn't in the game, or maybe they're not mentally ready to compete on this level, and they don't want that label attached to them either. So if you look at this graph, you can see that the top two reasons that student athletes are stressed out is balancing between school and academics, and then also not meeting their own expectations. This shows that student athletes are expecting high marks of themselves both in the classroom and on the track, and that balancing between them is really one of the hardest things for them to do. We also know that student athletes frequently feel misunderstood by the coaches, by the professors, and by their administrators. So they feel misunderstood by their coaches because when their coaches talk to them about practice and missing practice for school, they're like, oh, you're slacking off on practice, you're using schoolwork as an excuse. And on the other end, professors are like, oh, you're slacking off on your schoolwork because you're using athletics as an excuse. And they get caught in between. And the administrators also see them as not having the work ethic to do everything that they need to be, when this is often not always the case. So if we look at some things that we could use to fix this, we could use counselors that were former student athletes to come back and talk to the current student athletes to give them advice on how to take certain things. So if a student athlete has not experienced something before, or they haven't been exposed to this, then the former student athlete can give them advice, and they also have a lot of credibility with the current student athlete because they've been in their shoes. They've been where the student athlete is now. Also, if we could have some staff go back and forth between the academic and athletic realms, that would be beneficial as well to try to resolve certain issues that would arise and cause less stress on every level. So if we look at some different programs that could possibly be implemented to solve this problem. First, we could look at adding study hall hours as part of the 20 hours of countable team-related athletic activities. This means that every week, student athletes would be required to spend a certain amount of hours in study hall to take care of their academic responsibilities. This would decrease the stress on the student athletes because they would be fulfilling their athletic responsibilities and getting those full 20 hours, but they'd also be getting extra time in to be able to work on their academic responsibilities. If we look at problem number 2, we would educate the coaches about what to do with balancing student athletes in their academic and athletic parts. So we would give them more information on what exactly student athletes have to go through and all of those other things that add stress to the student athlete's life, and it would create a more understanding atmosphere. And finally, we could institute a grace period of 24 hours once a semester. This would be beneficial for student athletes because they could add 24 hours on one assignment. And this not only would give them an advantage, but it would also let them de-stress for all of their assignments, because they know that not every deadline is a hard deadline, and that if they really need it, they have one flexibility that they can use. And this will let them submit higher quality work overall, because if they know that they have that flexibility, even if they don't use it, they'll be able to de-stress and give higher quality work. So I hope that you're able to take this information that I've presented you with and seriously consider some of the programs that I'm advocating for. Thank you for your time.